Alright, today we're going to learn about the consequences of World War II. We got 4 daily objectives today. Number 1, define the Marshall Plan, the Bretton Woods system, the UN, NATO, and the Holocaust. Explain what happened to Africa and Asia. List and describe U.S. and Soviet Union goals in the U.S. in the Cold War, and describe mutually assured destruction. MAD. So one of the first outcomes of World War II was the outing of the Holocaust. So top government officials knew about the Holocaust in the Allied countries, but your average citizen in the United States, in England, and France had no idea this was happening. So as Allied forces moved closer and closer and closer into Germany and into Berlin, they started discovering concentration camps. Hitler believed that Aryans, what he called Aryans, basically Germans, were a master race that deserved to own the world. This is that extreme nationalism, that fascism we were talking about. This led to the imprisonment and genocide. Genocide is just like the mass killing of approximately 6 million Jews in Europe. Another 5 million people, including gypsies and the handicapped, were also executed by Hitler. Now, people Hitler considered undesirable were housed and executed in concentration camps. Up here, we can see a picture. All of these people are actually dead. They did not live. These are American troops discovering this camp. Down here, we can see 2 ovens. After people were killed in the gas chambers, they were cremated, and that's what we can see the remains of here. So there's 2 kinds of concentration camps. There's work camps and there's death camps. Almost all the work camps had this sign greeting you as you entered: Arbeit macht frei, which in German means through work there is freedom. This is at Dachau. I actually took this picture. Over on the right, we can see a picture of some people who had been housed in a work camp and freed after World War II. You can see they've been basically starved to death. These people were not treated really any better at all than the people who went to death camps. They just weren't killed immediately. They were killed after taking as much labor out of them as they possibly could. Up here, I took this picture as well. This is what a gas chamber looks like. So you would walk in through the door. You can't see here. There's shower heads around that would spit out the gas. You didn't actually know you were being gassed and killed. You thought they were showers. They'd close the door, and then you died. And then again, here's a picture of the ovens. That's where they would take the bodies. Other people in the concentration camps actually manned all of this. They would have to go and get the bodies out of the gas chamber and put them in the ovens and cremate. It wasn't generally German soldiers doing that. Well, this is a blown up picture of the one before, where again, these are all bodies. All of these are bodies, and American soldiers surveying what had happened. So, other than the Holocaust, close to 40 million people, not counting the 11 million from the Holocaust, died in Europe because of World War II. All of the major cities in Europe are completely destroyed. 95% of Berlin, that's the capital of Germany, is completely destroyed, nothing but ruins. You can see a picture here. This was taken 30 April 1945. Germany is totally blown away. $862 billion had been spent, and the countries of Europe were completely bankrupt. If you remember correctly, World War I was right at $300 billion, so this is almost 3 times the amount. And again, this is, several trillions in today's money. Many Europeans went hungry. They didn't have the trains, the networks to move food from the rural areas, the farms, to the urban cities. People didn't have money to buy food even if it was there. And that brings us to the Marshall Plan. So the USA and the Soviet Union were the major winners of World War II. England technically won, France technically won, but they were totally destroyed. USA was not. Soviet Union kind of was, but they had enough people and money that they could bring it back together. All of Europe is devastated, and European governments are unable to rebuild their countries by themselves. The Soviet Union refused to withdraw from the countries that they had conquered on their way to Germany, so they hold on to Poland and Ukraine and Hungary, for example. In an effort to save Western Europe from the Soviet Union and communism, the U.S. decides to enact the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan gives Europe $12 billion, that's $120 billion in today's money, to rebuild. The The idea is that if America gives free money to Western European countries, they can rebuild, they can ensure that those European countries stay democracies and don't try to become communist. Over here we can see who got how much. We can see the UK got most of it. France got second most. Kind of so on and so forth from there. The League of Nations had failed the world. It had failed to stop Hitler. I'm sorry. It's failed to stop Mussolini in Ethiopia. It failed to stop Japan from invading China. It didn't work. So the League of Nations is dissolved, and a second international body, the United Nations, is created after World War II to solve the world's political problems. Now, unlike the League of Nations, the United Nations is divided into two groups, the General Assembly and the Security Council. The General Assembly is everybody. Every country has a seat there. The Security Council is only the winners of World War II, along with 10 temporary members that serve 2-year terms. So the Security Council is made up of the US, China, Russia, France, UK, so the winners, and then 10 temporary members. Decisions of the Security Council are binding on the world. So if all of the Security Council members tomorrow came together and voted and said Canada is now part of the United States, boom, Canada would be part of the United States. That's the way it works. But that would never happen. Because you're not going to get, because first off, the votes have to be unanimous. And second off, all of these countries never agree with each other. Next big consequence is the Bretton Woods system. The Bretton Woods system establishes a couple things, primarily the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. These two organizations exist to discuss and solve the world's economic problems. The idea is if we have a World Bank, a place where all of the countries can come together and talk about money and fiscal policy, then we can prevent another Great Depression from happening. The Bretton Woods system is still in effect today, along with the United Nations. This is actually the hotel, Bretton Woods. This is where that took place. This is in, I think it's in Maryland. Talk about Africa and Asia for a minute. World War II led to the independence for European colonies in a lot of Africa and Asia. Some of that independence didn't happen until shortly after World War II. Some happened almost immediately. It just kind of depended. Many former colonies gained independence, especially former French and British colonies. Other colonies fought and won independence. Vietnam is an example, and we'll talk about that later. Decolonization did occur with severe consequences for both colonizer and colony. We can see over here a map of Africa, and we can see this map over here shows us which countries, modern countries in Africa, belong to which European country, and then over here on the right we can see when they got independence. So we can see South Africa was fairly quick, 1949. And then later into the 1980s with German Southwest Africa. So what we've got following World War II is a division, first of Europe and then the world. And that division is between the United States, the green, and the Soviet Union, the red. So the United States is the green. They stand for capitalism and democracy. And in the right, the Soviet Union, they stand for communism and authoritarianism, so dictators. And the line that really splits the world really goes right through Germany, which is important to know. This is where the Iron Curtain goes up, the Berlin Wall. Berlin's actually over here, but this is where the Iron Curtain pops up. It divides the Soviet Union and the unfree world with the United States and the free world, which takes us to NATO. So the United States decides that they want to form a military alliance between the Western Europeans and the United States. All of these countries in blue are in NATO. If you notice this country in South America, this is actually still a European colony, which is why it's blue. It's not actually an independent. But so NATO is established in 1948 to, and I quote, keep the Russians out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. They want to keep Western Europe from becoming communist. They want to keep the Germans from ever starting World War III. And they want to keep the Americans in because the Americans saved their butts in World War II and then gave them free money to rebuild. This is the military arm of U.S.-European cooperation. So, I mean, if you look at this map and then go back and look at this map, notice those green countries are the exact same countries over here in blue. It's the same thing. Each country agrees to defend the other member country if attacked. This is really important. So if the Soviet Union were to invade Poland or Germany, the United States would have to get involved. NATO is still around. This is actually a map of modern-day NATO countries, not during the Cold War. And we can see that it's fairly large. You've got Greenland, Iceland, and then most of Europe, in addition to Canada. Each country agrees to spend 2% of all of the money they make every year on military spending. Most do not. This was a big thing Donald Trump talked a lot about during the election. So Soviet goals. 25% of Soviet citizens were either killed or wounded in World War II. That's a lot. That is 1 in 4. The Soviet Union wants to build a buffer between Western Europe, what they see as aggressors like Germany, and itself. And as a result, the Soviet Union builds the Iron Curtain. It holds on to Eastern Europe, the Eastern European countries it had captured in World War II, and installed communist puppet governments in them. In response to NATO, the Soviet Union builds the Warsaw Pact, which forces Eastern European countries into allying with the Soviet Union. So again, we've got the red countries, and we've got the green countries. Green being the U.S., red being Soviet Union. This is a picture of the Berlin Wall, segments of which are still in Berlin. U.S. goals. USA sees half of Europe get captured by the Soviet Union and is terrified. It comes up with this policy called containment. The idea is if you can keep communism in the Soviet Union, it can't spread. So we've got to contain communism. We've got to contain communism. If we do not contain it, it will spread. And along with containment, the policy of containment is domino theory. So once one country becomes communist, another will soon follow, because again, they're afraid it will spread. So they've got to contain communism so that it doesn't spread under domino theory. So here we can see this is a communist Viet Cong soldier pushing Vietnam, making it communist, and then which will make Laos, which will make Cambodia, which will make Thailand, Burma, India, Bangladesh. And we've got the U.S. soldier seeing he's holding the dominoes up. He's keeping communism from spreading. And this is kind of the way the U.S. saw the Soviet Union during the Cold War. The bear represents the Soviet Union. We see the arrows reaching all across the world. Which leads us to MAD, or mutually assured destruction. The Soviet Union looked in awe at the atomic bombs dropped on Japan by the United States. Those things were extremely powerful, and they want their own bombs. They actually sneak in some spies into the United States. Those spies actually get into the Manhattan Project, and those spies steal the U.S. atomic bomb blueprints, and by 1949, only 4 years after the U.S. has got them, the Soviet Union's got them too. Over the next half-century, atomic bombs become nuclear weapons, and enough would be built to destroy the world many times over. Mutually assured destruction is the idea that if you nuke me, I'll nuke you. And if we nuke each other, everybody's dead. This is a key component of the Cold War, and it is a key component of international security to this day. People with countries with nuclear weapons don't fight other countries with nuclear weapons, because if they do, everyone will be dead. Take a few minutes, answer your 4 daily objectives.